We argued again that morning. It started over something small, like Emma not finishing her homework, but it quickly grew into a full-blown argument. Her eyes were fiery, her voice sharp, and mine was too. I could feel the tension crackling in the kitchen as words were thrown back and forth. Finally, she slammed the door and left, and I stayed behind, trying to calm my racing heart. A few minutes later, she came back. In her hands was a cup of coffee, just the way I liked it, but something was off. She didn't smile, didn't make a joke, didn't say anything about the fight. Her eyes were different, distant, almost empty. I froze for a moment, holding the cup she handed me, sensing that something was very wrong. It was subtle, but I could feel it deep down in my gut. I tried to ask her what was going on, but she only shrugged and went back to her room without another word. That's when the unease really settled in. It wasn't just a normal morning. Something had changed between us, something I couldn't see yet. I wanted to call out to her, to reach her, but I stopped myself, afraid of pushing too hard and making her shut down completely. I sat there with the coffee in my hands, letting the warmth seep through me, trying to shake off the nervous feeling. But it stayed, nagging at me. I remembered times before when Emma had acted differently, when her mood had shifted suddenly, but this time it was worse. It was heavier. Something was happening behind my back, something I couldn't quite put my finger on yet. I decided to give her space but stayed close enough to hear if she needed me. I kept thinking about the way she walked, the way her hands trembled slightly, and the strange quiet in her voice. It wasn't like her at all. I wondered if maybe she was hiding something from me, something serious. A mother's instinct is hard to ignore, and mine was screaming that something had changed. The day went on, but I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the kitchen. I tried to go about my routine, but every noise upstairs, every creak of the floorboards, made me tense. I knew that whatever was going on, it wasn't small. Emma was scared, or maybe confused, and I had to find out why. By the evening, my unease turned into determination. I had to understand what was happening. I couldn't let the silence grow between us. I had to get to the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. The first step was paying attention, watching her carefully, noticing every small change. Something had shifted in our lives that morning, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. That day started with an argument and a simple cup of coffee, but it ended with a quiet warning. My daughter's eyes had told me everything I needed to know, I just had to be ready to face it. After that morning, I started paying closer attention to Emma. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just teenage moodiness, but small things didn't add up. Her hands would shake slightly when she spoke, and she avoided looking at me directly, even during casual conversations. There was a tension in her posture, a kind of stiffness that didn't belong to her usual self. One afternoon, while helping her clean her room, I noticed a piece of paper sticking out from the side of her backpack. It wasn't her handwriting, and the words on it made my stomach twist. It was a note filled with instructions and reminders, urging her to do things she hadn't mentioned to me, things that didn't feel right. The handwriting was neat, controlled, almost like it belonged to someone older who knew how to manipulate carefully. I asked Emma about it, but she froze. Her eyes darted around the room, her lips pressed tightly together. Finally, in a whisper, she admitted that someone had been influencing her decisions, convincing her to hide certain things from me. My heart sank. The betrayal wasn't hers, it was someone else's, someone who had gotten between us without me realizing. That's when I remembered Claire, Emma's teacher. She was always kind and encouraging in school, someone I trusted without question. But suddenly, her constant involvement in Emma's life seemed more intense, almost controlling. I wondered if she had been giving Emma advice that went too far, guiding her in ways that weren't healthy. The thought made me angry, but I tried to stay calm. I needed to be smart, to understand what was happening before confronting anyone. Over the next few days, I watched closely. I noticed how Emma's behavior changed whenever Claire was mentioned. She hesitated, she avoided eye contact, and her answers were short, careful. It was clear Claire had some kind of influence over her, and it wasn't entirely positive. I felt a mix of worry and anger, worry for my daughter and anger at the person who was manipulating her behind my back. I started quietly collecting small clues, pieces of evidence that might explain what was happening. Emma would get nervous whenever Claire called or when she mentioned school projects. There were strange comments and suggestions from Claire that didn't make sense, things that seemed like they were meant to steer Emma away from honesty. The more I observed, the more I realized that Emma wasn't acting out of rebellion, she was acting under pressure. It hurt to see my daughter trapped like this. She looked so small, so unsure, like she didn't know how to stand up for herself. But I also knew that once I understood the full picture, I could help her. I could protect her and make sure she didn't get hurt anymore. By the end of the week, I had enough pieces to start seeing the pattern clearly. Someone had been using Emma's trust against her, and it had to stop. I made a silent promise that I would find a way to fix it, not with anger, but with careful planning. I wouldn't let anyone come between us again. That evening, I decided it was time to talk to Emma directly. I found her sitting on her bed, staring at the floor, fidgeting with the straps of her backpack. Her eyes were red, and I could tell she had been holding back tears. I took a deep breath and asked her gently, "Emma, I need you to be honest with me. Has someone been telling you to keep secrets from me?" At first, she stayed silent. Her hands trembled, and she hugged her knees closer to her chest. Then, in a small, shaky voice, she started to speak. "Mom, it's Claire. She's been saying things, telling me I can't tell you about certain stuff. She said you wouldn't understand or that you'd get angry." I didn't want to lie, but I felt like I had no choice. Hearing her words made my chest tighten. I felt anger rising toward Claire, but I also felt a sharp sting of personal betrayal. My own daughter had been forced into hiding the truth, and for a moment, I felt helpless. But seeing her trembling, scared, and trapped, my anger shifted into something else, protectiveness. I couldn't let anyone manipulate her again, not even someone I had trusted. Emma continued, tears rolling down her cheeks. She explained how Claire would give her instructions on what to say and what to hide. How every small lie made her feel guilty and more trapped. She said she wanted to tell me so many times but was afraid of making things worse or disappointing me. My heart broke hearing how scared she had been in her own life, trying to navigate someone else's control. I moved closer and took her hands in mine. I told her it wasn't her fault, that I understood, and that we would face this together. I reassured her that telling the truth now was the bravest thing she could do, and that I was proud of her for opening up. She clung to me, crying softly, and I held her, feeling both sorrow and relief. But underneath the relief, a part of me couldn't ignore the betrayal. Claire had crossed a line. Someone who was supposed to guide and support her had used fear and manipulation instead. The thought of that made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to focus on protecting Emma and fixing the situation. That night, I lay awake thinking about what had happened. I realized how easily trust could be broken and how dangerous manipulation could be, even from someone in a position of authority. But I also knew one thing clearly: I would not let Claire win. Emma and I were a team, and no one would come between us again. By the time morning came, I had made a plan in my mind. I would confront this carefully, not recklessly, and I would make sure Emma felt safe throughout it. Betrayal had entered our lives, but it wouldn't stay. Together, we would face it and come out stronger. After what Emma told me, I knew I couldn't just confront Claire blindly. I had to be careful and smart. I started thinking about ways to make sure Emma was safe and that Claire couldn't continue manipulating her. I couldn't let fear or anger guide me, I needed a plan. I decided to get help from someone I trusted completely. Mark, a coworker I had known for years, was calm, practical, and good at thinking things through. I told him everything, from the note I had found to what Emma had admitted. He listened without judgment and immediately helped me map out a way to gather proof without putting Emma at risk. We started small. I quietly collected the notes, messages, and instructions Claire had left for Emma. I also paid attention to any comments Claire made when she thought no one was listening. Mark helped me organize everything, making sure that each piece of evidence clearly showed manipulation without leaving room for doubt. As the days went on, I noticed small wins. Claire would try to push Emma in certain ways, and I could intercept without her noticing. Emma began to regain a sense of control, seeing that her mother was on her side and that she didn't have to carry this burden alone anymore. Each day that passed, I felt a little more empowered. The fear that had been hanging over us started to fade. I also started thinking about timing. Exposing Claire too early could backfire, but waiting too long might give her more chances to influence Emma. Mark and I carefully decided when to act and how to reveal the truth in a way that would protect Emma and hold Claire accountable. During this time, I noticed Emma slowly opening up again. She started talking about school, her thoughts, and her feelings without the constant fear of being monitored or judged. That small change made me more determined. I realized that this wasn't just about proving Claire wrong, it was about reclaiming Emma's freedom and confidence. I spent hours thinking about the confrontation that would eventually come. I imagined staying calm, presenting the evidence clearly, and making sure that no one could twist the truth. It gave me a sense of control in a situation that had felt chaotic and frightening for so long. By the end of the week, I had everything in place. I knew exactly what to do, and I knew Emma was ready to support me. The plan wasn't about revenge for the sake of anger, it was about justice, protection, and showing Emma that we could face challenges together. For the first time since this all started, I felt strong, capable, and ready. Something had shifted in me. I wasn't just a mother watching helplessly, I was a strategist, a protector, and soon, someone who would make sure that betrayal couldn't harm my family again. The next week, there was a school meeting that seemed like the perfect place to confront Claire. I had everything ready, notes, evidence, and a clear plan of what I wanted to say. My heart was racing as I walked into the crowded room, Emma by my side, her hand gripping mine tightly. I could see the nervousness in her eyes, but also a quiet strength, the kind that comes from knowing you're finally supported. When I brought up Claire's behavior, she smiled politely and shook her head. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice smooth and calm. She denied everything, claiming that Emma was exaggerating, and even made it sound like I was overreacting. My stomach dropped. I had expected resistance, but not this polished, confident denial that made it sound like she was in control. Emma watched silently, her eyes wide. I could see the realization in her expression, this wasn't just about lies or small secrets. Claire had been intentionally trying to manipulate her, and now she was twisting the story to make it seem like I was the problem. It was heartbreaking to see Emma understand the depth of the betrayal and the danger she had been in. I felt anger rising, but I pushed it down. This was not the moment to lose control. I reminded myself of the plan I had worked on with Mark. I didn't need to shout or attack Claire. My goal was to reveal the truth clearly and calmly, without giving her a chance to spin it. Patience and strategy were more powerful than outbursts. As the meeting continued, I focused on the facts. I calmly cited examples from the notes, pointed out contradictions in her story, and showed Emma supporting me quietly. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but the room started to shift. People could see that something was off, and the tension grew. Claire's charm couldn't cover all the evidence, but she still tried to maintain her composure, glancing around to see who was watching. Emma's presence made a difference. She began to understand that telling the truth, even when someone powerful tried to hide it, was important. She realized that the lies and manipulation had nothing to do with her worth or her mother's love, it was Claire's actions, and they were wrong. By the end of the meeting, I knew Claire hadn't been defeated yet, but I also knew I had planted the first seeds of exposure. The frustration was still there, but so was a sense of empowerment. I had faced her calmly and effectively, proving that clever, careful action mattered more than anger or public drama. As we left the school, Emma squeezed my hand. I could feel a shift in both of us. The confrontation hadn't ended everything, but it had started something important. The truth was beginning to surface, and we were ready for the next steps. Subtle, smart action would win this, and we weren't backing down. After the school meeting, I knew I had to make Claire's manipulation impossible to deny. I began gathering everything I could find: emails she had sent to Emma, notes she had left behind, and even messages from other students who had noticed her controlling behavior. Each piece was carefully saved and organized. I wanted the evidence to speak louder than my words ever could. With Mark's help, I arranged a plan to bring everything to the principal and a few trusted staff members. I requested a meeting under the pretense of discussing concerns about classroom guidance. Claire didn't suspect anything, and she attended with her usual polite smile, confident that she could handle any accusation. When the meeting started, I calmly presented the evidence. Emails showed Claire instructing Emma on what to hide, notes revealed manipulative tactics, and testimonies from other students confirmed that Claire had pressured more than one child. As I laid it all out, I could feel the tension in the room grow. Even the staff who had always trusted Claire began to look uneasy. Claire's face changed slightly, but she quickly tried to regain composure. She denied as much as she could, claiming that the evidence was misinterpreted, that she only wanted to help Emma succeed. But the room had already seen enough. The staff whispered among themselves, and the principal frowned. Claire's attempts to charm everyone now fell flat, and I could see the first cracks in her carefully built image. Emma stood beside me quietly, her hand on mine. I noticed the relief in her eyes. She knew we were finally getting justice. I felt a wave of satisfaction too, but I didn't let it cloud my judgment. I had to remain calm and focused. Claire's smiles and denials could hide more secrets, and I had to be ready for whatever she tried next. By the end of the meeting, Claire was clearly humiliated. Her authority had been questioned in front of her peers and superiors, and her confident facade had faltered. Yet even in that moment, there was a spark in her eyes, a hint that she wasn't finished, that she might still have plans hidden in the shadows. It reminded me that while I had won this battle, the war wasn't entirely over. Walking out of the office, I felt a mix of relief and vigilance. The evidence had spoken for itself, and Claire's control over Emma was broken. But I knew that we had to remain careful. Manipulators like her rarely give up completely. Emma looked at me and smiled faintly, the first real smile in weeks. I returned it, knowing that together we had faced something dangerous and come out stronger. For the first time in a long while, I felt that sense of justice I had been waiting for. Claire's lies could no longer hurt Emma, and our bond had grown even stronger. The danger hadn't vanished completely, but we were ready to face whatever came next, armed with truth and courage. After the meeting with the principal, I could see a change in Emma. She held herself a little taller, spoke more clearly, and didn't flinch when Claire was mentioned. The fear that had been weighing on her for weeks seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a quiet courage. I realized she had learned something important: she didn't have to be controlled or silenced. That evening, we sat together in the living room, just the two of us. I reached out and held her hands, looking into her eyes. "Emma," I said softly, "I'm so proud of you. You were brave today, and you stood by the truth. That takes real strength." Her lips curved into a small smile, and I could see tears welling up, not from fear, but from relief and understanding. She told me how much it had meant to her that I didn't yell or push her, that I had stayed calm and included her in the plan. "I felt like we were a team," she said. "Like we were finally facing it together, not against each other." I nodded, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in weeks. It was the first time in a long time that I felt we were truly aligned, ready to face whatever came next. Over the next few days, Emma continued to grow in confidence. She started speaking up more at school, standing her ground politely but firmly whenever Claire or anyone else tried to push her around. I watched her, amazed at how quickly she was reclaiming her voice. She asked questions, offered her opinions, and even helped me think through the next steps carefully. It felt like watching a scared child transform into a partner, someone I could trust completely. One afternoon, as we were reviewing some of the remaining evidence, Emma turned to me and said, "Mom, I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else." I smiled and squeezed her hand. "We will," I replied. "And we'll do it together. I promise you, nothing will break our bond." That promise didn't just feel like words, it felt real. The ordeal with Claire had been painful, but it had also taught us both something important about loyalty, courage, and trust. We weren't just mother and daughter anymore, we were allies. We had faced manipulation and betrayal head-on, and we had come out stronger. Even small moments felt different now. When Emma laughed, it felt lighter. When she spoke her mind, I listened with pride. When I shared a plan or an idea, she didn't hesitate to help. The fear that had once hung over us like a dark cloud was gone, replaced by a sense of empowerment and connection. I knew there were still challenges ahead, but I also knew we could face them together. Claire had caused damage, but she hadn't broken us. In fact, the whole experience had strengthened the bond between Emma and me in ways I hadn't imagined. We had learned that standing together, with honesty and courage, could overcome almost anything. After the meeting, I thought the worst was over, but it wasn't. Claire didn't give up. Instead, she started a quiet campaign to hurt me. At work, a few colleagues began questioning my decisions, repeating things Claire had subtly hinted. Socially, I noticed whispers when I walked into rooms, a chill that hadn't been there before. It was subtle, clever, and meant to make me doubt myself. At first, I felt the anger rising again. I wanted to call her out publicly, to make her pay for trying to harm me and Emma. But I paused. Acting on anger could make me look reckless or even give her a chance to twist the story further. I realized I had to think carefully, not just react. Every step needed to be calculated, every word deliberate. I considered my options. I could confront Claire aggressively, risking my reputation and possibly making Emma feel exposed, or I could stay calm, use intelligence, and find a way to protect both myself and my daughter. I chose the latter. I reminded myself that justice didn't need loud drama, it needed strategy. I started documenting everything. Every questionable comment, every suspicious interaction, and every moment that seemed off was written down. I organized the notes, creating a clear pattern of Claire's attempts to manipulate and undermine me. This wasn't about revenge, it was about protecting myself and ensuring Emma stayed safe. At work, I stayed professional, friendly, and careful. I refused to engage in rumors or react to subtle attacks. The tension was heavy, but I kept reminding myself that patience and careful planning would win. Claire might try to create doubt, but she couldn't control the facts. The hardest part was the psychological pressure. Some days, I felt exhausted, as if the walls were closing in. People's sideways glances, whispered questions, and Claire's invisible influence made me second-guess myself. But I leaned on Mark and a few trusted friends who reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I had the truth and Emma on my side. Emma noticed the stress too. One evening, she hugged me tightly and said, "Mom, you're handling this better than I ever could. I'm proud of you." Her words gave me strength. It reminded me that my focus wasn't just on defeating Claire, it was about staying strong for Emma, showing her how to face challenges without losing integrity. By staying calm and strategic, I started seeing cracks in Claire's influence. Her subtle attacks didn't gain momentum because I refused to give them power. The tension remained, but it shifted, she was acting out of desperation, and I could see it. I realized that maintaining integrity while seeking justice was harder than reacting with anger, but it was also more powerful. Claire's clever moves couldn't touch the bond one had with Emma or the careful plan I had built. The real victory would come from patience, intelligence, and staying above the chaos she tried to create. Finally, the consequences of Claire's actions started to catch up with her. The principal and staff had seen the evidence I presented, and they couldn't ignore it. Claire was reprimanded formally, and her influence over students was restricted. Some parents and other teachers who had suspected her behavior quietly distanced themselves, making it clear that her manipulations would no longer be tolerated. It was a slow process, but the walls she had built around her authority were crumbling. Emma and I began to feel the weight lifting. The tense atmosphere that had been hanging over our lives started to ease. Emma smiled more, laughed more, and seemed lighter than she had in weeks. We could spend time together without the fear of hidden threats, without the constant worry that someone was trying to control her. It felt like breathing freely after being underwater for too long. Our bond grew stronger. The ordeal had tested both of us in ways we hadn't imagined, but we had faced it together. I saw a new confidence in Emma, a quiet pride in how she had stood with me, how she had reclaimed her voice. And I felt a renewed sense of purpose as a mother, knowing that I had protected her while teaching her strength and courage. We spent time talking about everything that had happened. I told her that betrayal can come from anywhere, even from people you trust, and she nodded, understanding the lesson well. We reflected on the fear, the manipulation, and the anger we had felt, but also on the courage and patience that had helped us overcome it. It was a moment of clarity for both of us. Even in the aftermath, I remained vigilant, knowing that people like Claire rarely changed completely. But the danger she posed was no longer immediate, and we had the skills to recognize and respond if anything like this arose again. Our lives slowly returned to normal, but with a new layer of strength and awareness. There were small celebrations, too. Emma finished her school projects on time, and we shared quiet evenings without tension or fear. I realized that surviving this storm wasn't just about confronting Claire, it was about resilience, strategy, and staying true to ourselves. We had turned fear and betrayal into lessons of empowerment. Looking back, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The storm had passed, but we were stronger because of it. We hadn't needed anger or revenge to win, we had relied on truth, patience, and courage. That realization stayed with me, leaving a lingering sense of justice and closure. Most importantly, I knew that Emma and I had each other. We had faced betrayal together and come out stronger. The experience had tested us, but it hadn't broken us. Instead, it had given us both a deeper understanding of trust, loyalty, and the power of standing together. Sitting quietly in the living room one evening, I thought about everything that had happened over the past weeks. The fear, the lies, the manipulation, and the constant tension, it all felt like a heavy weight I had carried for too long. I realized that betrayal can come from anywhere, even from someone you trust, someone you believe is there to guide and protect. That truth stung, but it also made me stronger. Looking at Emma, I saw how much we had grown together. She had faced fear, confusion, and pressure, yet she had found her voice and courage with my support. I had learned to act with patience and strategy rather than reacting out of anger. That approach had kept us safe and helped us reclaim our lives without stooping to cruelty. I realized that intelligence and careful planning are far more powerful than revenge or uncontrolled emotion. I thought about Claire and what she had tried to do. Her manipulation had been clever, subtle, and dangerous, but it had failed. Not because of anger or confrontation, but because we stayed united, patient, and focused on the truth. I understood then that strength isn't about hurting someone who wrongs you, it's about protecting what matters and facing challenges with courage and integrity. Emma came over and hugged me. I held her close, feeling the bond between us more deeply than ever before. This experience had tested us in ways we didn't expect, but it had also shown us the value of trust, loyalty, and love. We had survived the storm, not by fighting recklessly, but by relying on each other and staying true to ourselves. I thought about how many people might face betrayal quietly, unsure how to respond. I wanted to remember this lesson: patience, strategy, and care can overcome even the most difficult situations. I wanted Emma to carry that lesson with her too, that the choices we make in moments of crisis define our strength, not the actions of those who try to hurt us. The quiet evening reminded me of how much we had overcome. Life was slowly returning to normal, but the lessons remained. I felt a lingering sense of satisfaction, not from revenge, but from knowing that we had stood our ground, protected each other, and grown stronger together. The fear, anger, and tension had transformed into resilience, understanding, and empowerment. I whispered to Emma, "Sometimes the people you trust the most can hurt you the deepest, but survival and love are stronger than any betrayal." She nodded, eyes shining, understanding the weight of those words. In that moment, I felt peace. We had faced something painful and emerged wiser, braver, and closer than ever. The experience left a mark, but it also left a lasting strength, a reminder that love, patience, and intelligence can overcome betrayal. No one can take away the bond between a mother and her child, And no manipulation can weaken the courage that comes from facing challenges together. We had survived, and that was more powerful than anything Claire could have done to us.